Welcome back to the Digital Accessibility Podcast. If you're looking to learn more about the field of accessibility, how to implement it within your role or your company, or to get advice on where to start or see how others have navigated complex issues that you may find along the way, then you're in the right place. I'm honoured to be able to share these insightful chats with thought leaders, advocates, and practitioners of digital accessibility throughout this podcast, and I hope you'll find it a useful resource. As always, thank you so much for listening, and I hope you enjoy the chat. Welcome back to the Digital Accessibility Podcast. In honour of Global Accessibility Awareness Day 2025, we have an extra special episode where I'm joined by many of the previous guests of the podcast, all on one call. We can have some back and forth discussions and share some positive results and news that we're seeing in the accessibility space. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our speakers. Ronnie Hendricks, Head of Accessibility at Momensa, Craig Abbott, Principal Accessibility Consultant at Tetralogical, Helen Burge, Director of Accessibility at Teslio, Paul Van Werkum, Founder and Consultant at ABRA and the APT Foundation, Mark Lepole, Director of Accessibility at eBay, Mamouna Madawi, Senior Manager at Stepstone Group, Grant Broom, Founder and Principal Accessibility Consultant of Access Inc., Heather Hepburn, Head of Accessibility at Skyscanner, and last by no means least, Jeremy Grandstaff, VP of Business Development at CurbCut OS. I'm also joined by one of my colleagues and PCR Digital's Operations Manager, Joyce, who will help to spotlight our speakers into their groups. So let's jump in. We're going to start with some group discussions where I've tried to group our guests based on their expertise and industry background. Each group will discuss a targeted question. You'll each have about 2 minutes to talk, so give people a break from me, followed by a brief sort of open discussion if anyone wants to jump in. So first off, we are going to our group, which is Helen Burge, Paul Van Werkum, and Mark Lepole. I'd like to know, if any, what exciting innovations in technology or design have made digital experiences more accessible in recent years. We are hearing a lot about AI and automation recently, but is there anything else that's been sort of brought to the forefront of design and tech that's pushing us naturally towards more accessible and inclusive products and services? Who's happy to go first on the question?
I'll go first. I'll spiel a bit, ramble a bit. And it's funny you mentioned AI and automation and then you said, other than that, sort of what else? But that's all that's in my mind. Like, it's just so recency bias maybe, but like, I don't know that even 2 years ago, we'd be thinking about summarizing spreadsheets and presentations to make things more efficient for us, delivering that sort of content. And so when we think about, innovations maybe need some air quotes a bit, but how we use this technology to help designers, developers, testers, maybe even processes overall really comes to mind. So it's a bit of a mashup of stuff in my head at the moment because we're really sprinting toward June 28th for EAA, which some of your listeners may know about, this little thing coming about. So, but when I think about tactical things that AI might be able to help with, I think about design and how, at least currently or recent years, we've really been thinking about how to raise awareness among our designers who maybe have a bit of a knowledge gap. So how do we leverage technology and tooling and integrate or inject accessibility into their worlds of working? How do we do that for our developers with maybe linting or recognizing potential syntax errors or potential accessibility issues with how we're writing code so that the code quality and consistency is better? But on the design bit, can we leverage any of this to identify and annotate for accessibility within Figma or other design tools? How do we use the technology to call out what those attributes or values should be so that education continues to happen, but also informs our developers as they're building things? Because we're still people, for the moment, at least, building these things and creating our sites and experiences. We don't know how much longer that may be. But then when it comes to testing, how do we leverage tooling and or AI to go in and test and simulate actual usage of a site. There's already a lot of things out there available that can do some simulating or emulating of keyboard behavior, activating controls, all the things that we as practitioners check for. But the next level of that is, how does that AI actually identify those issues and fix them? And then retest, fix, learn, fix, learn. And then ultimately, how do those tools start to talk to one another? If we call them agents, and how do they then communicate? But I don't know, being a bit of an old in this industry, we still need the human bit of this at the moment, at least, doing that validation, understanding that output, like how are we checking things to see that that output is actually valid, what gets rendered to the screen. How might these AI learn about the actual platform that we're intending to publish to? So a web interface slightly different from an iOS interface, an Android interface, whatever devices come out in the future, whatever platforms may emerge. How do we ensure that output is valid for those devices in those environments? But the biggest thing in my head right now is the EAA stuff. So at a process level, which might sound a bit boring, we're still a small team. So how do we govern all of the policies and processes that we're putting in place so that we can sustain a more accessible eBay, at least in this current world of mine? But whatever company you end up working with, how do we ensure those workflows and the things that we hopefully injected along the way are being followed and not creating obstacles for other teams or conflicts along the way? So that's my bit of ramble a bit, just trying to figure out where we fit into existing workflows, existing tooling. How do we leverage technology to do that more efficiently, lighten the load on the humans a bit, but not so much that we're eliminated, but like that sort of scary side of AI. Those are some things that come to mind for me.
Amazing, yeah. Leveraging what we already have and continue, will hopefully continue to be a part of the whole process. It's yeah, it makes perfect sense. Paul, can I come to you next at all? Have you got anything to? Do you agree entirely, or have you got anything else that you'd like to add with different sort of tech and innovation?
Yeah, I can add that. Yeah, for apps, it's sometimes a little bit different, because where you see that, for example, for websites, you have the ACT rules, and you have like techniques how to fix things, and you have failures, and you have test scripts, and if you feed AI that information, you can like automate things. But for apps, there's no such thing yet. So what we see is that there's let's say apps are a few years behind, and basically speeding up towards the same point. So it's going way faster, but also that's way more challenging. So I prepared this meeting and I was thinking about like, okay, what's innovation like? But for apps, it's basically like getting those ACT rules, getting those techniques, getting those failures ready, so that you all have the same way of doing things. And what I see is that, of course, like also the work of Daniel with its 365 days of iOS accessibility, the work that we did with the app.org platform, but also the work currently done with the mobile task force, where we're interpreting the guidelines for mobile. We'll make sure that across the world we're using the same guidelines, let's say. And with apps, I see so many different ways of testing apps that it's not really an equal, or like, it's not really level playing field at this moment. So that's something. So you need to have more knowledge. That's the first. What I see the biggest challenge for, let's say, bigger companies is the lack of experience. So basically, I always use the example, you have 100 developers, let's say in a magical way, you're able to educate them and like let them use the process, and that you're basically amazing at accessibility. Yeah, after 3 months, there are 10 new people, and those 10 new people, they never heard about accessibility because they don't learn it at schools, and at their other companies they didn't. So what you see now is that it's shifting, and it's like the bigger companies are, let's say, speeding up and doing trainings, but it's some years behind what we see on websites. And what I see that with websites, you can just like, there's a lot of free tooling available, and also paid tooling that has even more integrations possible with basically for apps. It's just coming. There's no way of automating app accessibility testing at this moment. So we see that that's a big challenge, because if you are not able to trigger your developers, testers, designers at a very, very fundamental level, if they add something, that they check it themselves on few basic points. If you can't do that, there's no feedback loop. The feedback loop is like 3 months later doing a big audit. So it's hard to learn if you don't get feedback. It's hard to create awareness or to read into things if you don't get that trigger. And that's something that currently with apps is getting there. But what you see is that because with websites it's much easier. It's easier to create the knowledge and awareness in your teams. And with apps, that's the biggest challenge. So to summarize, more knowledge, more experience, and more tooling will be needed. And I think in the coming years, apps will catch up, because it will become more and more important, because apps, let's say, the bigger companies have a website and an app. Most people are using the app and not the website. So for big enterprise companies, the app is more important than the website quite often. So it will speed up. At governments, there's more websites than apps, and it will change into more apps at the big enterprises. So the European Accessibility Act is moving the market in the right way, at least for us at Aber.
Absolutely, and that's great. I mean, we know you're doing so much great work in that space as well, in terms of trying to elevate that training and education on the mobile side of accessibility as well as the web. So, yeah, appreciate all you're doing, and yeah, we can all definitely learn more, and hopefully it will catch up and be in a similar sort of position in the near future. So, Helen, I'm going to come to you now, if you don't mind. Could we hear about sort of any positives that you've got in that sort of tech and innovation space?
Sure. One thing that I think has been fantastic for the screen reader users is the AI embedded inside. So things like being able to use object character recognition to read something where someone hasn't put alternative text. I do tell my team they have to disable that for testing, because we're not allowed to make excuses for the developer. But it's great for the user. It does mean I had in a previous role a blind boss, and I could email him a receipt without having to transcribe it, because he could use the OCR to read it, which did make me feel a bit lazy and cheeky. I did give him a synopsis, but he wanted to see all the, but I do think that the technology changes in the assistive technology that users are using is making life easier for them, so long as the AI understands what a cat is. I think that's the issue, isn't it? How much we're training the AI. I know I did try and ask AI to write some accessibility tests for me to see how much it understood the checkpoints. And after having to correct it a few times, because it really, I swear it was using a blog that someone had no clue about what these checkpoints are. I don't know the source, but I knew it was wrong. And I was like, I'm not going to spend time training it. My husband has warned me, like Mark mentioned, Skynet's there. But it is good if it's used in the right way. I do think, keeping in mind that the AI tools you're using might share information. Private things like anything you don't want shared, don't use with it unless you've got a specific application that is private and not in a shared network. So we as humans just need to realize that we should use tools in appropriate ways, and then it will help us with gaining knowledge, sharing knowledge, and using some of the automation tools, because I think it is possible to automate most things, but you can automate it poorly if you don't understand what you're doing. So I think, as Paul and Mark both said, it's the human part of the understanding what's coming out of these machines that if we don't understand it, it's going to cause more of a headache. But when we've got there, I think it'll be epic. I'm not going to say it's going to reduce all the workload. It would just reduce some of the items that is often caught by automation. So it won't be things like, are the instructions meaningful? Does the alternative text make sense? It might do eventually, but for now, it'll be, is something that should be there, that's subjective, there is always going to require a human to think about it. But the AI will hopefully get us thinking about the harder issues and not wasting I shouldn't say waste, putting a lot of effort into finding stuff that is easy for a tool to find for you. So I think that's the most recent changes. 5 years ago, I would have said automation was way off, and now I think it's getting there.
Amazing, but like you say, I think to all of your points, the human element, keeping that alive in everything that we do is, I mean, we can't avoid it, and I don't think that anyone's intention is to completely, ensure that we only have robot overlords that are doing all the work for us. I mean, maybe it'd be nice we could all just sit on a beach and drink pina coladas and the robots do all the work for us, but ideal world and all of that. So no, I really appreciate that. Is there anything conflicting? I think that it was quite I think we were all in agreement there on those sorts of things. Was there anything that anyone wanted to add at all?
I think that if we look at AI and the possibility there, that if you put the full responsibility at the side of the user to use AI to be able to understand information, how the app works, how the website works, like that's not the right thing. I think you should implement AI at the developer's side, that they can do the right thing, automate it fully, but that they're responsible for the end result. Because otherwise, yeah, if I make a contract with a company and it's like somehow translated with AI and it's like the amounts change, like who's responsible? So I think that you should always put it at the developer side, and then AI can also make a big difference because they can prevent probably a lot of the issues ever from happening. But I think that if I currently look at that the end user uses AI to fix things, that's quite risky, because if there's an interpretation error, then the end user is also responsible for that and also making the wrong decision there probably. And that's something, it's a bit scary, I think, as an end user, that you cannot trust your output. Or so that's something I'm thinking about. It should be at the developer side or at the tester side, like at the company side, that's like responsible for the website or the app.
Mark, did you have anything as well to add on that? Oh.
I was just going to say, there's even though there's some alignment in a lot of what we're saying, I think there's still that bit of skepticism in the back of our minds. So I don't think there's anything wrong with that. It's just that maybe that's a bit of a timing thing, like everything that's introduced that's new, or like a lot of things that are introduced as new, and I'm not quite sure how to interpret yet as we wrap our heads around those advancements. But
it's hard to comprehend that if things move like ×2 each year, let's say in 5 years and 10 years, like let's say in 20 years, like everything will be like you create a complete app within like a few seconds probably. So but you can't, I'm not able to comprehend that it's will be that way, because it's going too fast. So yeah, interesting times.
So
but
Joe,
will it
next
be
year,
accessible? If they create something in 2 minutes, will it work?
Joe, next year we could just be a bunch of agents on this call. You could input a few prompts into something to create a podcast and done. How much editing do you have to do then? No, well, the agents took care of it, and Joe's got all these.
Yeah.
Anyway,
so I don't even exist. I'm just an anomaly. I'm not actually a real person, so it's fine. That's the only way.
I'm trying to represent realness by eating a few bites of watermelon on the side. Yeah. So.
Amazing. Thank you all so much for that. I really, really appreciate that. Awesome points. Very, very relevant. I'm sure that all the listeners will agree. And so we're going to move on now to our next group. Thank you all so much. And so our next group is Mimouna Madawi, Grant Broom, Heather Hepburn, and Jeremy Grindstaff. And the question that I had for you all was, how have you seen businesses embracing accessibility as a core value? And if you have any success stories that you can help to inspire others to follow suit. So Mimouna, can we start with you, please, with your thoughts on this?
Oh, I didn't expect to start. Thank you, Joe. Well, I guess one of the things I was thinking about looking at this question and sort of like reflecting on my own journey in accessibility and bringing that topic into my own organization is that if we say, like, so many businesses have their own like company values, core values, whatever we want to brand them, and very rarely would you have something that is like we don't care, basically, about our audience. We don't care about different groups of users. You would really, really rarely have that. But saying that it is your core value, that you care about inclusion, that you care about disability inclusion in particular, is a whole different thing in practice. And delivering on that is completely different, or demands some work. And I think showcasing that in terms of business impact, driving awareness, being an advocate, not just ticking those boxes and trying to meet compliance, being spooked by the European Accessibility Act on the way, and all of that, that actually, for me, if you say it's a core value, it's something that you really care about as a business, you're not just ticking those boxes, but you're really trying to build that culture across the entire business. You're not just funding a team. Hopefully, you are funding a team to actually look after accessibility as well, which is in itself a big challenge. But you are also providing the chance to everyone across the business to be responsible somehow for accessibility, for disability inclusion, for advocacy, for driving awareness. It's not just the product and tech teams. It's not just the finance team providing the budget. It's not just one team. It's really everyone. And I think by combining those forces and those different levels of influence, those different levels of impact, you can really drive that impact as such, and not only have that pure business bottom line type of outcome in a way, but actually reputationally being able to make that difference and tell that you are trying to make that difference. So I think for me, if we say it's a core value, the proof is in the pudding in that sense, where it's a culture that nobody is arguing anymore within the organization, that it's something that you really live and not just say you live. So that would be my 2 cents on this one.
I love that. Absolutely. I think we can all agree on that. I'm going to bring Jeremy in now, if you don't mind, just to sort of get your views on this question. And hopefully you're in agreement with Mim, but yeah, maybe you've got some different views.
Well, so the question is an interesting one for me on a number of levels, right? As a blind person using a screen reader, and as someone who's, has that seen disability for the last 49 years of my 49-year-old life, up until I actually started working for a company where we can help solve the problem, accessibility for me was, I need you to do this for me so that I can do my job. And so when I saw this question and I thought, what are the organizations that I'm seeing embrace this as a core value? And I'll also caveat this by saying I live in the United States, which has a whole different thing going on right now than the rest of the world. And that's what makes this very interesting for me. I think it probably comes down to, I'm going to say 3 to 4 because I didn't write them out. So I think I'm going to get it into 3, but we'll try for 4 at the most. They understand the business case, right? Companies that are really leading here understand that when you improve something for a person with disabilities, you're actually fixing it for everybody and making it a better experience for everybody. And so for them, it's not the for leaders leading companies in this area, it's not the conversation that I'll have every once in a while, which is, yeah, Jeremy, I'm trying to sell you something, but we don't really target people with disabilities, which is kind of offensive on its own, right? But they really understand that there's a number of people in the world who are leaving buying power in a shopping cart, and it's because they can't buy from you. And they get that case. They also understand the concept, and I'm sure someone else will talk about it, of baking it in from the get-go and how that costs less money, right? And they get those things. But I think there are 2 other things, maybe 3, that actually the leaders stand apart. The first one is being able to reframe the dialogue. And the reason that I say that is because in the US, that's a big part of what we're dealing with right now, right? I am not allowed to use the word equity or diversity or inclusion when I'm talking about accessibility. And as a person who depends on accessibility for equitable opportunities, that's a really hard argument to do, right? But reframing it as power, reframing it as opportunity, reframing it as claiming buying power, right? And looking at ways to do that. So that's one. I think the second one is another one is looking at, if you're doing automated audits, are you using multiple rule sets and multiple auditing engines? And by using those multiple rule sets, everybody's solution is always a little different. If you can find a solution that's using multiple rule sets to do automated audits, you just increased the amount of errors that you're going to be able to find, because we're not using this multiple rule sets. But the really key one, and I promise I'll bring this to a close because I feel like I'm talking too much, but the really key one, it's about the user experience. I can talk about accessibility. I can talk about accessibility. I can talk about doing it because it's the right thing to do for people with disabilities. But when I talk about helping create world-class user experiences for everyone, light bulbs go off, and I can't even see them, but I know they're going off, right? People get it. And the ones who don't are probably the companies I don't want to work with anyway, if I'm just being really blunt. So
Here.
That's some thoughts.
I think you nearly got a cheer from everyone there, Jeremy. So that's a great achievement. So thank you so much.
And that's not even writing it down. So I hope I covered it all.
Amazing. You're just incredible. Love it. Thank you so much for sharing. Heather, can I come to you on your thoughts on the topic as well?
Yeah, hey Joe, hey everyone. Thanks for having me. It's great to be here. Well, I'm just going to tell you a bit of a story about how Skyscanner went from absolutely nothing to, well, for accessibility being from nothing to a core value where I am. So yeah, 5 years ago, before we started the accessibility program, there was nothing. It wasn't being worked on. It wasn't being talked about. It wasn't on any roadmap or radar or anything. So after we got the program up and running, after a little while, I thought, wouldn't it be a great opportunity to talk to all the new people coming into Skyscanner and get them while they're fresh and keen, and actually tell them about the importance of accessibility and why they should be thinking about it. So I asked the people who run our global induction sessions, I went to them to say, hey, any chance of a little slot in there, just a short one that I can come and talk? And they said, no, we don't have time for that. So our global induction sessions happen every couple of months, and it's when all of our new people come from all of our offices all over the world to Edinburgh for 2 days, and they get taught all about the company, about the business, and about the values and everything. So they didn't have time for just a little 20-minute chat on accessibility then. Then move forward a few years, and they actually came to me and asked if I would please do a talk at Global Induction, and could I also possibly run an empathy lab for one of the whole afternoons of the 2 days. So that was a lovely, lovely shift. And actually just feedback yesterday that I got about the empathy lab from the folks at the last induction was that it was the #1 standout from the whole thing. So that was really nice to hear. Yeah, it was great. And I must just add, when I do that talk there, I'm one of 4 people, and it's part of a bigger group now called Positive Impact. So that is accessibility, sustainability, DE&I, and communities, which is our charities team. And the group is relatively new, but it's very, very much a core value and a part of our core company strategy. We report every quarter to the exec team and ultimately the board. So I just love how it's gone from, nah, we don't have time for that, to what it is today. It's been awesome.
Oh, that's incredible. And yeah, amazing work, because that's What a complete shift, a 180 turn, to go from not bothered or not interested to, and that feedback obviously is invaluable as well. So it's just so great that you can sort of use that to hopefully maintain that, and it will be something that's just part of everyone's induction moving forward.
Yes, it will be.
Very important, I think. Yeah, and that kind of goes back to Paul's point as well about, if you've got a development team that have really worked hard, they care about accessibility, they've, made the best product they can, that team may move on, and then a new team may be hired. And I might be stepping on something that Grant's about to say, actually, so I'm going to shut up. But yeah, so Grant, I didn't mean to leave you last, but someone had to be. So I'm going to bring you in now if you've got some thoughts on this, please.
No, that's absolutely fine. It was nice to hear, everybody's viewpoints, and as they were speaking, it was just resonating with my own experiences. So I've been in accessibility for quite a long time, and I've seen the progress of accessibility over the years. And I think what we're finding now is a lot of what maybe Heather's experience has been, where you're just getting so much more management buy-in now, because it is actually becoming part of core values, and businesses frame accessibility in a different way now, and they give much more importance to it than what used to happen. And I think that's mostly apparent in meetings now, where you'll turn up and there's senior people there, and there'll be lots of people in the meeting because they're just interested in accessibility, and they're interested in what you've got to say, and that's just happening more and more, and it's because it's just an important part of their brand. And then perhaps the second thing that I've noticed is just the level and frequency of engagement as well. You see that instead of, the traditional way of doing accessibility would be to build a product and then do the accessibility audit at the end, and that's changing probably out of necessity, because it's very hard to pass an audit like that, and you're finding that teams just demand more from you as a provider of accessibility services. And it's great to see that it's just being taken more seriously, and that's the level that you want, and that's what you want to, and that's really what you expect from teams that really do have accessibility as part of their core values. And that breeds a healthy culture, of course. So once you've got a healthy culture of accessibility, and I can think of, a few examples of organizations that we've worked with where it's just part of their DNA. It is just, it's part of their definition of done. We hear that said a lot, accessibility needs to be part of the definition of done. And you see with these successful agencies, that's absolutely the case. If a product isn't accessible, then it's not done, and it doesn't go out. And I think that is, it's just absolutely great to see. But yeah, I don't think I got anything more than that to add to this conversation right now. But yeah, it's just very encouraging to hear what's been said by the other people in this group, because yeah, it really.
That's perfect. I think it's nice to hear that positivity, and I think that's something that I wanted to breathe through this episode, especially we've got everyone in one room. It'd be miserable if we were all just complaining about how bad it is in accessibility right now. So no, it's nice. We've got smiling faces. It's the best thing ever. The other thing that I was going to get a little bit political and maybe throw a spanner in the works now, but you mentioned about we're seeing a lot more buy-in, and more of the clients and companies that you work with, you're seeing that at that management level, and there's a bit of a step change in terms of the definition of done, and it's actually an ingrained part of culture. Are we worried that with what's happening in the US, sorry, Jeremy, that's potentially going to maybe shift, because obviously it's a very different environment, and I think a lot of us in the UK used to look to the US and think, it's a more sort of litigious environment. There's potentially more, litigation and things. And if that's going to be changing, could that have a knock-on negative effect to us and Europe, or are we balancing out with the dreaded EAA?
Yeah, I think we're insulated. Actually, I think I don't expect that we'll have the same exposure to what's going on over in the States, which just seems so extreme. It's hard to get your head around it, really. And I think that, I think with the EAA coming down the line, it's so difficult to imagine that we'll find ourselves in that same scenario. And I really hope that we don't.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, incredible answers again. So thank you all so much. If there is anything else, then please let me know, and I won't swiftly move on. But if you're all good, then we'll go to our next and final group before some final thoughts. So finally, we have Craig and Ronnie. So the question I would like to ask you both is from either a public sector, because I know that both of you have done a lot of work in that field, and consultancy viewpoint. What's been the most inspiring sort of shift in that leadership or policy that you feel has driven real change in recent years? I feel like I'm probably gearing you both up to talk about the EAA, so hopefully you surprise me. But Craig, I'll come to you first if you don't mind.
Yeah, I mean, I think the EAA is definitely something that is driving change. There's no doubt about that. I think I don't know if it's necessarily an inspiring shift or an inspiring kind of change. I think the EAA is definitely causing organizations to take note and do more work in those sorts of things. But I would say that from what I've observed, it seems to be more fear-based than because they've been inspired by it. So I definitely think with legislation, there's a place for that. Like that, it does drive that change, but it doesn't always kind of come from with the right intentions, I suppose, from the people that are trying to implement it, I think. But I mean, there has been a lot of good stuff with legislation and those sorts of things. I mean, along with the EAA, I mean, obviously that's the first time we're kind of seeing that crossover into private sector stuff, which is I mean, it's the first time it's really impacted private sector. So it's really good to see that. And I think we're also seeing more kind of harmonization across legislations. I mean, like WCAG's now in the Americans with Disabilities Act. It never used to be. It was kind of alluded to. Like if you got sued for it, that's the standard they'd use in court, but it wasn't actually in the legislation. So I think those sorts of things are definitely helping the harmonization of it in the new legislation. But I think for me, the most inspiring thing that I'm seeing in terms of the leadership side of things, I think is just actually seeing people step up and doing that kind of leadership role in accessibility, doing that accessibility role in an organization. I think there is slow culture change happening. I think it's definitely slow, but it is there. And I think it's largely down to the leadership and the work that gets done by the likes of the people that are on this call. I think accessibility has always just been seen as compliance. It's that box ticking exercise. In the legislation, I suppose, often reinforces that. But I am starting to see a shift to more kind of sustainable accessibility practices. We're seeing more things like inclusive design principles, cognitive accessibility guidelines, neurodiversity policies. More people are getting hired. I think like W3C are doing, they're drafting cognitive accessibility guidance, which is a known gap in WCAG, which is something that the legislation isn't going to fix. So I think people are waking up to the fact that accessibility is much more than the code base. It's looking more broadly across the organization at things like policies, at things like processes, at things like training. It's like Paul alluded to earlier, right? If you've only got a few members of staff that do your accessibility because they're passionate about it and they leave the organization, all of that accessibility knowledge leaves with them. So that's the way it always was. And I think if we think about large organizations where you've got a lot of governance and you have things like security policies and mandatory security training and GDPR compliance and these sorts of things, like imagine if you had one person that just did all of your security training, all of your security policies, and then they just left. Like organizations would never let that happen, but they always have done that with accessibility. So yeah, I have noticed things are starting to change. I mean, organizations are starting to hire accessibility specialists. We are seeing more and more job adverts come up for accessibility roles. I mean, you're always sharing them. They're not always paying the right amount, which I know me and you've spoken about, and that's a
nothing to do with me.
Yeah, we are seeing them come up at least. And I think even those organizations that are still trying to tack it onto other roles, like at least they're acknowledging the need for accessibility now, which is a much better place than where I was at 5 years ago when I was writing job descriptions for DWP because we'd never hired accessibility specialists before. So yeah, I think in terms of leadership, I do think the most inspiring shift that I've seen is the fact that people are actually leading on this stuff now and they're getting the buy-in to do it. And that is changing organizations and the kind of landscape of accessibility as a whole, I think.
Definitely. I think that there is a bit of there's obviously the growth in what everyone on this call has been doing over that period of time as well. You've had to slog it out. You've had to have that resilience that we've spoken about in previous episodes as well to keep driving and pushing for that. So it's like a everyone pat on the back moment, really. Not me, I'm not taking any credit again, but it's thanks to that you're starting to see that, I think. So it's nice to focus on those positives. I know that there is an awful lot that we could focus on that isn't going our way all the time in this sort of community, but it's just great to hear that it's being seen broadly across the board. And Ronnie, bringing you in now, hopefully you're seeing the same sort of thing, or if there's anything in particular else that has sort of inspired any leadership or policy change.
Well, I think Craig put it very well in that. One of the things, like, I've been in this space for over 2 decades and been working a lot with governments, and like Craig said, it's always been either like on the back foot somewhere, somebody somewhere did a little thing and that's it. And living outside of the UK, like, people in our government in the Netherlands have always looked to the UK as like a decent example on how to do these kinds of things. Even looking at the GovUK design system, but also now, like, within the UK government, there's not enough, but there's a way more accessibility focused roles within departments. And we're slowly starting to see that move happen in the EU as well. I think I've seen 3 or 4 just this year already within the Netherlands. There were a couple last year. And it just shows that organizations are taking it more seriously and are embedding those roles better in their organizations. From a consultancy point of view, I'm also happy to see agencies similar to Nemens and Tetralogical like follow in that suit. Like, I know we do a lot of education in that part, and I know Tetralogical do as well. And so, like, instead of just telling people or giving them an audit result saying this is what you're doing wrong, we're all actively trying to instill knowledge and maturity within our clients, because we all realize that that's the only sustainable way forward. I don't want to keep working with the same clients over and over and over again, because that's boring to me and it doesn't yield any progression. So building maturity with and having people in those organizations that you can actually, well, you can support them in building that maturity. They can create their own network and their own governance inside of the organization. And sure, you can support them with expert knowledge, but it's building their capabilities, and we're seeing that those type of engagements more and more and more, and not only within the UK, like we're having those types of things happen in the Netherlands, in France, in Germany. Like and that's good to see. It also sparks a bit of hope for the EA. Like like, mind you, it took the government sector 8 years to get to this point, at least under the Web Accessibility Directive, right? So by now, under the directive, like, most organizations are on their 3rd audit cycle to keep their accessibility statements in check. And it's finally they're realizing maybe we need a more sustainable way of solving this problem. So hopefully that like businesses tend to be more efficient. So you'd hope that they have a bit of a quicker adoption rate in that sense. But yeah, learnings across the board, I would say. Yeah.
Amazing. And I just want to sort of re-clarify something. I'm sure, Ronnie, you love working with your clients over and over, just probably not on the same issues, because you're like, come on,
Yeah,
we've helped you with it.
Honestly,
But no, amazing. I mean, across the board, I think throughout the whole episode, you know, everyone's touched on that education piece, and we're all still learning. I definitely am. I know nothing, but we're all still learning every day, and there's going to be new challenges and new things that are going to pop up. It's tech, you know, everything's going to change, and who knows? You know, maybe there is hope in our AI and robot overlords one day just saying, do you know what, it's absolutely fine. But I just feel that that's the app. You need to have that appetite for continuous learning when you're in this field. But my opinion.
I think just to touch on that point as well, and something that Ronnie kind of was talking about in terms of getting bored doing the same things, or I think there's a lot of, like, we see the same accessibility issues come up time and time again, and they're things that are really easy to find. I mean, you know, you still see color contrast fails, and you can just run an automated tool and find them straight away. And I think it's really interesting when you get a real challenging problem where, you know, there's a screen reader that has a particular bug with a certain thing, and you're trying to find ways around it. And I think it's if we can get the education piece right and get that sort of, it's like the maturity model, right, where you've got the steps and whatnot. I think if you can get to the point where accessibility maturity is at a certain level where everyone can kind of do the basics, then it frees everybody up to work on those really interesting, challenging problems, I suppose, where, you know, there's particular nuance in the screen reader or the technology that's being used. But yeah, I think when everyone's just churning audits out, I think everyone gets a bit sick of just finding the same things.
I think so. I was having a conversation yesterday about the WebAIM 1 million websites as well, and I know that a lot of that, it can just be a kind of maybe information dump, and it is the automated things that can be found. There might be a lot of false positives as well with that kind of reporting, but it does seem to be the same 4 to 5 issues that come out every single year. That's what we're reporting on. So yeah, if it's that fundamental level that those things get fixed, it's still going to be an incremental increase in accessibility overall, isn't it?
Yeah, I think that's like, unfortunately, it all hangs on education. Like, the reason we're seeing those types of issues, and we're seeing them time and time and time again, is because people simply don't know. And like, yes, we all do a lot of outreach and we do a lot of education, but from that regard, there's still so much to do. There's like dozens of people every month that come to our training sessions and have never heard of accessibility before. And they all work in digital. It's like they're designers for digital. They're developers, web app, you name it. Like, they've never considered it, or have certainly never had any like serious piece of education on it. It's not covered in any curriculum or whatever. So there's unless we start focusing on that area and tackling it from the source,
yeah,
we're gonna see that loop happen.
Maybe everyone that ever gets a job ever should just be going to Skyscanner's inductions, and Heather can just, you know, give them that intro from day one, you know, regardless of what company they work for. So thank you guys. Thank you so much. It's really, really, really appreciate you being on the call and for all those insights. So I'm going to bring everyone back in now. For our final round, I'd like to ask each of our speakers to share a 1-sentence takeaway or a quote or a lesson learned to keep that hope and vision for the future of accessibility. So I'm going to come to Grant Broom first, if you don't mind.
Yeah, thanks. I would just say accessibility is very hard So just keep making progress and focus on progress over perfection.
Love that. Amazing. Thank you. Helen, have you got a quote or a takeaway to share?
After all this talk, I have to admit, it's opened my eyes that we're all one big family. And when it comes to accessibility, we might love each other and hate each other, you know, the infighting between companies. But what it comes down to is we're all looking for the user and trying to make something better for them, even if it means using different tools we might not be comfortable with. So I applaud everyone for opening my eyes to a few new ideas. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Helen. Paul Van Werkum, I'm going to come to you next.
Yeah, I want to make some conclusions, and it's getting better. It's getting better. I'm only in the accessibility field for a few years, but it's getting better. But yeah, we should together work on getting it better, easier, quicker, and with a little bit more fun. And that's what I would like to wish everyone.
Amazing. I actually really like that. That should be a tagline. Accessibility, it's getting better. It instills some hope, at least, isn't it? I love that. Next, Mark.
It's hard, and it will
sorry.
take some time. But yeah, it's hard and it will take some time, but it's getting better. Yeah.
Absolutely. I love that. Mark Lepole, going to come to you next.
Right. So if any of your listeners are just starting out, just get started. Like, don't be overwhelmed with all the tools. We're hearing from some experts. We have ranges of experience. Just get started and make some movement. And I'll reiterate Helen's bit. Just remember, no matter what we're using or what technology or AI comes about, that there's always a person at the end of the thing that you're building. So keep that person in mind for whatever it is you're building, because we're all different in some way and we consume content differently. So keep that in mind.
Love that. Jeremy, if you've got a one-liner.
All right.
Or four, it's fine. Don't worry.
Okay, I appreciate that. I'm going to just put this out there. First of all, starting the conversation around accessibility can be really difficult. My recommendation is ask the question, why is accessibility even important to you? Why are we having the conversation we're having today? And just let them talk. They will talk themselves right into it. All right. But here's the other piece that I wanted to share. And Joe, I'm going to do my best to make this very short and as powerful as I can. Because as I was listening to us having this conversation, I was reminded very early in my career, I used to work with biking and walking advocacy organizations, and they were always separate, right? Bike Massachusetts, Walk Boston, and they always competed against each other. But the ones who did it really well, it wasn't about biking and walking. It was creating safer places for people to get to their destination. It was creating networks of transportation options. It was about equity. It was about, creating a transportation system that got people to where they wanted to go. And it was really interesting because the car people would jump on board with that argument and they would help to support it. And so when I mentioned earlier, bring it back to the user, I'm not joking. We are making improvements as a field. I think part of this conversation is around learning how to do better, but I think it's also about how do we reframe the conversation? If I try to have a conversation with somebody, you should make your stuff more accessible. Sure, when I have the money, I'll get to that. But if I say, you should make sure that all of your users are able to access a world-class user experience, how can anybody look me in the eye and say no to that?
Yeah.
Just a thought.
Absolutely. I mean, that's a very long one-liner, but I love it, and it's very relevant. So thank you so much, Jeremy. Next, I'm going to come to Mimuna Madawi. If you've got a quote or an inspirational paragraph.
I feel like I'm going to be like, I have to share that kind of like meme with my face in the middle of it and then that quote below, now that you said that. I think what I would say, and that's a little bit like what was said earlier, advice to the newbies in this industry and this field of work, because I still feel like a newbie in this, is that we all need to be patient to a certain extent, and I'm one of the least patient persons on this planet. But change and culture change can take time. So just remember that every step forward is a good step forward, and just keep going, basically, even if sometimes it doesn't feel like it's enough, it is a step forward. So go for it.
Absolutely. Love that. Hopefully it's a step forward in the right direction as well. Amazing.
Yeah, I mean forward, not backwards.
Yeah. Perfect. So Heather, have you got something to share, please?
Yes, I have a hopeful vision that Ronnie actually touched on already. But I'm really hoping to see accessibility built into higher education courses so that graduates leave uni or college or boot camps with accessibility knowledge. I think that will be such a game changer for our entire industry. So yeah, I'm excited for that.
Amazing. Absolutely. Yeah, can't start it early enough, right? I know that there is someone as well that I'd like to give a shout out to. Her name is Helen Wilson, and she's starting at the key stages for primary education and introducing people to be a bit more knowledgeable about working with or understanding people who may have an impairment or disability. So even earlier, it's just, yeah, it'll be incredible to see that go through the curriculum. Brilliant. Craig Abbott, have you got something to share?
Yeah, I don't know about a vision, but I think in terms of a takeaway, I think like as Grant says, like accessibility is hard. And I think a good point to take away from this is that AI isn't going to fix all your accessibility problems. So just to kind of reiterate what Mark said, just get started, like take an interest in it, but more importantly, take responsibility for your part of the thing. Because whether you're a designer or a developer or you're writing Jira tickets or whatever, you've got a part to play in terms of making sure accessibility gets done. So, yeah.
So we're doing our bit.
If I could just jump in there as well, AI isn't going to fix it, and overlays aren't going to fix them either. I'm just wondering whether anyone else was going to mention that.
Yeah.
It's meant to be a positive episode. Let's not give them the time of day. No, I appreciate that. Ronnie, you're going to come to you next.
Yeah, well, Hannah took my spot away. No shade. So I'm gonna actually cross daggers with Grant a bit, because I would say accessibility isn't that hard. It's hard. He does have a point. Don't get me wrong. It can be very hard, but I would argue that most of the things that we can solve that make better and accessible experiences for people at large scale aren't that hard. But it does require a certain level of automation, a certain level of education, a certain level of awareness through education. So yeah. Yes, accessibility is hard, but it doesn't
need to be. Yeah.
Everything.
Amazing, thank you. And last but by no means least, we're going to go with Danny DeVessa Dirksen starts.
Yeah, can you hear me? Nice.
We can.
So yeah, I want a t-shirt with all of them. Like if they give me a pound every time I said progress over perfection, cultural change takes time, just get started. It's not that hard. It can be hard. I have a short one and a long one, if it's okay. Like the short one,
yeah,
I don't know who said that, but I repeat it over and over as well. I saw someone say accessibility is not extra steps, it's steps missed, and I love that. Every time that someone says like, well, but it's going to take so much extra work, I redirect them to this one. And there's another one that is from Whitney Quisenberry. Is usability and accessibility are twins separated at birth. Same goals, but like two brothers in a fable, they took different paths. Accessibility took a legal rights path. This gave it power, but not a lot of love. Usability took a user research path. This gave it a deep insights, but not a lot of power. What happens when these two meet? Can we get deep insights and great power?
Love that. Wow, yeah, the melding of two worlds or twins separated at birth. I mean, that's a great analogy. Love that. Incredible. Well, I wish I could stay on this call all day and all night with you, but unfortunately, we all actually still have jobs to do. So I'm going to leave it there. But thank you all so much for your time, all your wonderful insights, sharing with us also openly as well, and just giving us all of this time. So you're all incredible and just genuinely incredible people. You're dedicating your working lives and careers for the betterment of the web, and let's not forget, for the user. I hope you've all enjoyed the chat, made some more connections hopefully in the space, and we continue to grow together as a community. So thank you to all of our listeners. Wishing everyone a very happy Global Accessibility Awareness Day, or GAAD 2025, and hopefully see you on the next one. Thanks again.